On today's show, we say goodbye to Michael Porter Jr. I keep saying that he's still alive. He's just going to be a Brooklyn Net. We'll say goodbye to his time as a Nugget. We'll try and give Mike his flowers and the respect that he deserves from being a core member of the core four. Can he spread his wings in Brooklyn a little bit more? We'll try and put Michael Porter Jr.'s Nuggets career in perspective here on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us, making us part of your day, being with us Monday through Friday, being an everydayer. Appreciate you guys being part of our community. We do appreciate you joining us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. Or if you're joining us at youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets, give us those likes and subscribes. We do appreciate your support, and we appreciate you being part of our community because we know so many of you, and we're so glad to do so. On today's show, we will try and put Michael Porter Jr.'s career with the Nuggets in perspective. We'll try to appreciate what he brought to Denver, what was impressive about it. We'll look forward to his time in Brooklyn and see what we think about his career going forward. To do so, I'm Matt Moore. I write the Denver Dig. You can catch me at the Action Network and on Locked On NBA Daily. I'm joined by Ryan Blackburn and Mile High Sports and the Pickaxe and Roll podcast, and Swipa from Swipa Cam on YouTube and on Twitter after every single Nuggets game, as well as on Player's Choice, fighting the good fight and standing up for Nikola Jokic wherever there is an opportunity to do so. Today's show, by the way, is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, guys. So Mike says goodbye yesterday in his video message, kind of talks about things in Denver, said that he was kind of ready to spread his wings. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Talked about the end of how bummed he is that it kind of ended the way that it did because Denver, he was so injured at the end of that series. It's always a shame when no one ever goes out on a good note, though. You never really get to go out with like, that was perfect, and then I was traded. That's just not really how it works. Swipa, let's start with you. What are you going to remember Michael Porter Jr. as a Denver Nugget the most for?
To maybe be the most talented high school prospect the Nuggets have ever drafted in the history of the sport. Before I met you all, when I was simply just fans of the show and I was just Cameron, and I remember I asked asked Ryan Blackburn, hey, I would love to come on your show sometime, back in like January, February 2021. And then Matt Moore was like, who's this YouTuber that's constantly bothering me? I came up with Porter. Like, Porter was like my guy. I watched Porter in high school, and I said this on the show the other day, but Porter was one of the 5 best high school players I had ever seen. And this includes like Zion, LeBron, Porter. A lot of y'all probably don't remember like Akil Carr and all of them back in the day, Sebastian Telfair. I watched Derrick Rose. I watched, saw Ben Simmons for a little bit, Michael Beasley. Porter was averaging 36 and 13. And I remember watching him and saying, I've heard a lot of people say that this is going to be the next KD. That's the actual next KD. Then he gets hurt. He plays 3 games at Missouri. And when the Nuggets were getting to the 14th pick in 18, y'all, and I saw MPJ was still on the board, I said, there's no freaking way that the Denver Nuggets are about to draft Michael Porter Jr. And it happened wearing the dopest suit at the draft as well. And then he said he wants to be the best pick in franchise history. I loved MPJ in Denver. I thought that MPJ, I talked about this as well, his first breakout game, Ryan, with the Indiana Pacers, we had 25 points, was sidestep threes, getting to the basket, up and unders, dunked on Miles Turner. He was honestly someone that I just was hoping for the absolute best for. And I think he actually ended up exceeding expectations given the context. And I just truly, truly, truly loved watching Michael Porter Jr. in a Denver Nuggets jersey.
Yeah. Who was Porter's high school coach in Seattle?
In Seattle?
Brandon Roy.
Yeah, Brandon Roy.
Brandon Roy.
Yeah, that's my dog. Shout out Brandon.
Back in 2017, I was a team manager at University of South Carolina, Go Cox. And SEC team, it was such a big deal when Michael Porter got hurt. It was such a big deal when he got hurt the first time. it was like national. It was huge news at that point. But especially for kind of in that college basketball space, because you're right, he was built to be the next KD. And he talked about I was going back through the rabbit hole on various videos, and I saw an interview that he did with Taylor Rooks after winning the championship. And he said that he was sad going back and watching his high school highlights because it was a what could have been. It was a what could have been story for him before he got hurt the first time. Then Denver drafts him. He talked about he could barely walk up to the stage at that draft and couldn't like really do anything. And they ultimately decided we have to get a second surgery. And then I watched him, and he had previously talked about how the bubble he felt like was his big breakout. And I went back and watched some bubble highlights. Guys, he's still so fluid, so amazingly athletic and fluid in the bubble. I could not believe it. Everybody should go, like when you have an opportunity, go watch some bubble highlights from Michael Porter. He had no idea what he was doing, man. None. But he was so talented and good anyway. And then he got hurt again. And it is a story of both tragedy, given the talent that he had. And I don't know if he's going to be able to get back to that. He talked about wanting to get back to that and kind of expand his game a little bit. But it's also a story of just fighting through adversity as much as anybody in the NBA from a physical perspective, and making the best of a bad situation and becoming an NBA champion for a team. That's a crazy story.
Yeah, I think the perseverance is what I'm going to stay with. Like, to me, it's not a tragedy because, he did get to have this moment and these games and these days with the Nuggets and be a part of this team. And like, if you say Michael Porter Jr. in this town, anybody that was around in sports in Denver is going to know exactly who you're talking about. And we'll remember like, oh, I remember that game. I remember this game. I remember that shot. I remember the way that he was able to shoot it. And I think for me, I am always going to be so impressed with the perseverance of Mike, not just physically, but mentally, because I'm writing about this over the dig right now. There are so many guys that come in with his pedigree and they hit this kind of wall. They hit a coach like Michael Malone is like, you're not playing if you don't play defense. You're not playing if you don't know where you're supposed to be on the floor. You have to learn these things if you're going to play in the NBA. And it was such a fight with all of us, between the people that wanted Mike to be able to play and screw up as much as he wanted because he made some buckets, and the others that wanted him to learn, like, you're going to have to play like this if you're going to execute in the playoffs the way that you need to. Porter could have bailed at so many points. He could have been like, I want out. I got to grow my game. I could be a superstar. I want out. I'm tired of this. Let me be me. And there's like, it's not even like this. It's not, I think it's selfish when they do that, but I don't think it's like intentionally selfish. I think they're just like, I know what I'm capable of. And why am I having to do these things that I'm not good at instead of these things that I am? But Mike did all the things that he's good at that he wasn't good at. He learned to play defense. He ran to the corners. He learned how to run the offense. He learned how to play within himself. He learned when to get out of the way and when to make big plays. And that stuff is so hard in the league for these guys because every player in the NBA has come into this league when they were the best player on their team at one point or another, or every step of the way. Like high school, AAU, college, these guys have been the guy. And to get it out of your head of, Mike always said over and over and over again, he said, I just want to win. And he backed it up. You know how rare that is? You know how many guys are like, nah, man, nah. Because you want to know why? You want to get a case of this? How about Jeremy Grant? Jeremy Grant had other priorities, and that's fine. Jeremy gets to have other priorities. But I'm always going to respect Mike for backing up what he said. Mike said, I want to be a winner. And he won with this Denver Nuggets team. Coming up, we'll talk about his time, a little bit more about his time in Denver. We'll look back at some of his best games. And I want to get these guys' thoughts on what he can accomplish in Brooklyn if there's still more moments to add to his basketball legacy in Brooklyn. We'll do that next here on Locked On Nuggets. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I'm going on a trip next week, which I have to actually talk about with these two coming up. I'm going to be on vacation. I'm taking my daughter to go see the Monterey Bay Aquarium because she's obsessed with being what she calls an ocean vet or a marine biologist is what I keep thinking in my head. She's always wanted to go there. I'm taking her. I'm so excited, but got to make room for that in the budget. And so we use Monarch Money to take a look at where our accounts are, where we're able to put this stuff, what we need to cut back on in order to afford this trip. These are the type of things that you can accomplish with Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. Ryan Blackburn, Swipa, and me, Matt Moore, whole crew here with you on a Wednesday. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, is it Thursday?
Yeah.
It's Thursday.
Yeah.
It's Thursday. What is time, really, Blackburn? What is the game that's always going to stand out in your mind, Ryan, when you think of Michael Porter Jr.?
Oh, man. There's a lot to choose from. It's over the course of the last couple of years, I don't necessarily want to pick any because I think about it as the growth and the ability to rise up and how he continued to develop. But the one that every time I think about is Game 5 of the NBA Finals, where it wasn't a shot-making game from him until he made the shot that mattered. It was fighting through a variety of struggles that he had making shots, dealing with the pressure that Miami put on him, because that was one of the things that they did. That's one of the things that a lot of these teams have done to him, is be extremely physical, be extremely technical, get under his airspace and force him to deal with it. And he ultimately found a way, especially in that game. I believe it was 16 points and 13 rebounds, I want to say. But he had the between the legs layup in transition that was kind of like a reverse behind the back between it was great. And then he had the pull-up three that was so huge in that game, and it just felt like the cover came off of Ball Arena at that point. It was a massive moment.
That was such a great game for him to contribute in the ways that he could. Unfortunately, Ryan, I regret to inform you that because it wouldn't look good on a true shooting added chart, we can't really consider it. He actually sucked in that game. I'm sorry to.
He did not. See, that was actually a very good, efficient game.
What? But there's these charts, these charts that show us everything about whether or not players were good or not in the playoffs.
Matt is now adding in a different argument into this and trying to get a rise out of Swipa.
Yeah, I didn't even take the bait.
Not even.
How about the this one is not going to be remembered because it was in those dead years. But the best game that he had was actually versus Portland, the double overtime game when they knocked off Portland.
Really?
In 2021.
Game that was 2021. Right.
2021. And
he was corner pass over the top when Jokic was on the left post.
Yep.
And threw it over Nurkic.
Same double nickel game as well.
Yeah. The other one, I think, if you kind of look back at the history, I thought he was massive in all those Lakers games.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that they beat the Lakers in back-to-back series if not for Michael Porter Jr. He was such a bad matchup. The team in the West that's probably most glad to see him gone has got to be the Lakers, because it always seemed like they would try and throw everything at Joker to try and get the ball out of his hands, and every time Porter was there to make him pay for it. So, what's the game that you're going to remember from MPJ?
Maybe a little bit more of a hidden one. I'm trying to think of what's the one that we haven't necessarily discussed. But I think the 6 3-pointer game in Portland, remember that was game 6?
Yeah.
And it's so funny. He set the NBA record for the most 3-pointers in the first quarter. And then the same day, I believe, Devin Booker tied that record with 6 threes in the first quarter as well. So I think it was something about the moon, aligning with the stars somehow, did that. But I think that game, because, there was no Murray, Porter was like kind of injured at that point, and that was like the staple. Like the success of the season was they only won 48 games, but they made it through the first round despite all the injuries. Remember, Will Barton was injured in the playoffs. Monte was injured in the playoffs. It was like, it wasn't great, Bob. It wasn't great at all. You know what I mean? So I think that was probably like one of the moments where you got over the hump. And I also want to remind people of this, because a lot of people kind of, they want to, misremember, Porter's time. And like a lot of people, Matt and Ryan, they talk a lot about like the contract that he got. Like, I can't believe that the Denver Nuggets paid him all that money. Like, I can't believe they would do that given his limitations. I don't think people remember this, but when Jamal Murray went down at game 48, there was a stretch of basketball where basically Michael Porter went from being like this, like a nice, fun, like, nice player to have on the roster, to he became an absolute monster. And in that last half part of the season, Porter was basically averaging for the last 18, 19, 20 games of the year. He was, or 23 games, 24 points, 7 rebounds, y'all. And I don't know if y'all remember this for that stretch. He was shooting 45% from 3 and 66% from the field and 85% from the free throw line.
He was a flamethrower.
So
that was best stretch of his career by far.
And that's when he got the max, because everybody was like, oh, we see it. Because remember, I think, Ryan, me and you used to talk about this. He was the second most talented Nugget on the roster.
Undoubtedly.
And so he was moving that direction. But then obviously everybody remembers in preseason, he has to kind of a little bit of a tweak in a back injury going into the 21-22 year. And then he obviously gets hurt versus the Houston Rockets and just misses the dunk. He's out the whole season. So again, his career got derailed by back injuries. And I think that third one in particular, that really took a lot out of him. And to this day, he still plays with drop foot. And I think a lot of people don't really appreciate what he actually does on a day-to-day basis to be able to play and contribute to the degree that he is. He's the best shooter in Denver Nuggets history. He's the best volume jump shooter in Denver Nuggets history by far. And he's also one of the most efficient scorers in the history of the franchise as well. So honestly, like, he was just a transcendent player. But despite all the injuries, he still was able to become an extremely serviceable star role player level player.
Coming up, I want to ask the guys how Mike's career could have been differently. We'll do some what if games. Plus, we'll talk about what Mike can do in Brooklyn and if there's more that he can add to as he tries to spread his wings there. We'll talk about that coming up on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us on Mike Day, as we want to celebrate Michael Porter Jr. and his time with the Denver Nuggets. I feel everybody wants to talk about this, and I'd like Ryan's thoughts in particular. He says, guys, can you comment on Maul's treatment of MPJ? Treatments, I think, is a little bit of that's a little bit of a harsh word, of MPJ, and why MPJ had more good starts of games than middle of games. I will just say that as far as his hot starts, I asked about this every game, and I asked multiple players on and off the record. And I got the same thing every single time, which is like, look, man, they don't have him on the scouting report because they're worried about the 2-man game. So they help off of him, and then he kills them, and then they shift, and they're like, all right, we can't leave him open anymore. It was the same thing every game, where teams would be like, all right, let's see if Michael Porter Jr. can beat up. He beat us. Okay, never mind. But the problem was just that Mike didn't have a lot of counters to the adjustments. Mike's game, and we'll talk about that kind of in a second. Like, there wasn't a lot of ways for Mike to be able to switch how he could punish the different types of coverage that he saw. So that was always my perspective on it. I know, Ryan, like, you were always like really frustrated with the fact that he would have these hot starts and then wouldn't see, like, it felt like he wouldn't see the ball. And I don't know what his touches actually looked like, but he wouldn't get shots up after. He would just kind of vanish, even if the Nuggets were playing well. What is kind of your thought on one, the Jamal Mike dynamic, which was such a, it was talked about, I think, more than it should have been. Sure. But also, like, it was a big point of contention, and then also kind of his pattern of how games went. Yeah,
so there's a pecking order for the Nuggets. There has always been a pecking order for the Nuggets, and it was established before Mike got there. And it's so, like, this is such a unique situation, because I do think that there is a world where Jamal would have faded into being the third best player on the team, third scoring option, whatever. had Mike stayed healthy, had he not had that third back surgery, and they kind of evolve a little bit differently. I do think that that's a world that kind of was available to them. It didn't work out that way for a variety of reasons. You could name Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Michael Malone as 3 separate reasons for why it didn't happen that way. But the main one is that Mike got hurt, and the team needed to trust different things, like different mechanisms. They had to have their bread and butter. They had their things that they could trust on a game-to-game basis, and they were already in the business of trying to win a title. They weren't really in the business of development at that point. So it's tough because I understand why people are saying that. I do. I just don't think it was ever really a thing to that degree. Jamal had this massive breakout in the bubble. Nikola's got this massive breakout as an MVP. Like, it's really hard to have 3 separate, different, varying breakouts at the same time and continue to put voice to those things all the time. But like you talked about from like an on-court perspective, yeah, teams are going to allow Mike to shoot or allow Mike to get free, and then they're going to adjust and say, that's probably not a good idea because he's really good. And so then they stop doing that. Denver did not develop the mechanisms in order to help him work beyond that, unfortunately. That was one of the things when coming back from the back injury. Michael Malone was very much get to the corner, do your job, be a role player. This is not necessarily a Jamal Murray thing. This was a coaching staff thing.
Yeah, and I don't think it was just a coaching staff thing. I think it was just like, I think there's so much less room for experimentation in the regular season than I think people realize.
Yeah.
I think if you don't have expectations to win a championship, which means you don't need a high seed, then you can afford those types of things. But trying to be a team that's like, we're going to experiment and let guys grow and work on their games, and we're also going to win 55 plus games.
It's hard.
This was always the conflict that I don't think Calvin Booth ever really reckoned with. Swipa, what are your kind of thoughts on Mike and how things can be
y'all
different?
know where my brain went to? 1920. Let's travel back. This is pre-pandemic, right? Prior to the bubble. What was the? Do you remember the Milwaukee Bucks record when they played in Milwaukee? I think they were like 50-8.
Yeah,
when the
crazy.
Nuggets went there.
It's crazy.
Yeah. They were smoking. Oh, yeah. And the Nuggets won that game. But do you remember what Michael Porter did to Chris Middleton? I don't know if do you remember the penny crossover?
Yeah.
It was a behind the back, boom. And I'm talking about Chris fell to the side and then he splashed a midi. I was like, who is this? Remember, I was calling, he looked like he was going to be T-Mac, y'all. So if the injuries didn't happen, man, I'm not, man. If he had some more fluidity in his movement, in his handle like he used to, and his ability to get to the rim, the athleticism, if he had the explosion that he had, especially when he was in high school, he was catching lobs from everywhere. Man, Porter could have been a 3-level dog.
Yeah.
If he would have been able to really, truly invest in his body to the degree that he could. But like I said, despite all that, to be able to go out there and to earn $170 million over the course of your rookie extension contract like he has, and to contribute to winning, like, and I'll say this, y'all, like, people can say what they want. Michael Porter Jr. was a part of the best starting lineup in the NBA for the last 3 years. And he's a big part of why. Even you look at Jokic's numbers are way better with Michael Porter Jr. Why? Because you allowed to have an outlet like that that's an elite play finisher on the floor with you. He does a lot for you. He plays really well, like I said, with Jamal, playing off Jamal. So, like I said, man, if he doesn't get hurt, I think we're having a whole different conversation, not just about Porter, but about the Nuggets.
I was asked on postgame on radio during Porter's breakout season about in the future who is the next player to be an all-star for Denver. And I said MPJ over Jamal.
Yeah.
Just because it looked like MPJ was going to be I was like, well, he's only going to get better and complete his game. And I do think that he definitely hit that stagnation. So that kind of brings us to our next thing, which is, he said in the video he's looking forward to, and I totally understand it. It's like he was happy to stay and compete here, but it's like if you're going to put him on Brooklyn, he gets to have an opportunity to actually accomplish some of the things and be the type of player that I think he always wanted to be. And we don't know how many years he's going to have because of the back situation. Ryan, do you think that it's an opportunity for him to kind of, in that environment, spread out a little bit more?
Of course. I mean, we'll see what his body can do and what he can actually handle from a physical perspective and also just from an off the dribble perspective. But I do think that like the touches are going to be there. That he was always kind of put into role player touches for Denver for obvious reasons. But there is no Jokic to kind of put the ball through like every single time. They're going to have 17 different point guards in Brooklyn trying to figure out who to pass the ball to and who's going to pass the ball. But there's one guy who you know is going to try to finish the play, and Michael Porter's going to get a lot of shots up as a result. Whether they're good shots or not is a fair question, but he's one of the toughest shot makers that we've seen before. I'm not sure like how he's going to handle it from a physical perspective, as I said, but I do think that there will be an opportunity for him to score more points. It's probably not going to lead to winning, but that's not really his fault necessarily. The rest of that Brooklyn roster is not very good.
When is Porter's high? But even Porter's high scoring games have typically always led to winning. But I think that's just by the nature of the kind of shots he gets and the efficiency of his shots. The question is going to come down to, you know, just the context around him. Obviously, It's not going to be able to help that. But also, what do you mean he doesn't have a Jokic? Have you seen Cam Thomas, sir? Have you seen? Have you seen Cam Thomas? I mean,
well, let's understand what's going on here. Like they'll find the guy. Like he's there. He's never going to be situations where Michael Porter's going to go without a shot for a full quarter. That's for sure.
I mean, I'm just going to prepare you right now, so you better be ready because they're going to come at you on player's choice if Mike breaks out.
It shouldn't be. I've already contextualized this already. I've already put the line out there. There is a world for Porter to average, I think, 19 to 23 points a game on really good efficiency, and 7 to 8 rebounds to get his trade value up. And all of a sudden, the team's like, can we use that? Because you're in an isolated situation where you're just able just to do what you do, and there's no true pecking order except for Jordy Fernandez's system. I don't think there's even there shouldn't be a conversation because the biggest issue with Porter was the money and the fit. It's like you can't pay that much to a player in this role who doesn't do these other things when you can split that contract up, and now the Nuggets look like a tier 1 contender. I think that's actually most people's adjustment with the MPJ thing. Even outside of Denver, most people acknowledge it's not necessarily a talent thing why Porter's not here, but I just can't afford to pay you $38 million for this role.
We also just saw with Mikal Bridges, by the way, where he just jumped from a role player making role player shots in Phoenix to whoa, this guy actually has some first, second option potential.
But then also went back down because his time in
Brooklyn, which is
wasn't
what
great.
I kind of expect with Porter.
Yeah. Jim Dog JF says when Porter was on, he opened up everyone else's game. That's why. Who do you guard at that point? The problem I think is that it did get to the point where the Nuggets relied on that formula so much that teams were like, all right, don't leave Porter. Play the pick and roll this way. Aim for these shots. That's one of the reasons I think Aaron had such a great year shooting is because they were like, all right, don't leave Porter, leave Gordon. Then Gordon was like, well, I will make them then. And he did. And that's, Malone constantly said this, and I will say he's not wrong, which is regular season, the Nuggets had an elite offense. You just can't argue with it. They did have an elite offense. It was weird because all of us felt like they left meat on the bone offensively. We never felt like it was they hit the level that they needed to get to. But
I think the tertiary ball handler is what unlocks that part, though. Would you agree?
Not even that. To me, it's just they were running full back dive the entire time trying to get to the paint. They never actually opened up the playbook enough in order to diversify and do the things that they needed to do, become a elite playoff offense.
Yeah,
well, they've had elite. They've had elite. Sorry, my bad. They've had elite playoff series though. Offensively, I think that the consistency has just been the issue. But I think some of that's also Murray's health in 24. I think if he was healthy, the offense would look better. Go ahead, Matt. What are you gonna say?
No, I just think having a secondary ball handler I think helps now because it's a counter to how teams have guarded them. There's always this long-term chess match that's played. You come in and you revolutionize things. Again, this is another reason why I think the Thunder stuff is really a little bit exaggerated. I expect them to win over 60 games next season, but I don't think the defense will be as good. You know why? Because every team is going to be like, this is what we do to not turn the ball over against them. And some teams will still fall into that trap because they're dumb. But a lot of the smarter teams will actually come in with better game plans.
Yeah, man. I'm telling y'all, Matt, I said the league changed from where Denver was in 23 to 25. I think the league changed from 24 to 25. I think the league is about to change again because, again, Cam Johnson for me is like I've been listening to takes on national television. They're like, oh, Cam Johnson, like, Michael Porter, Cam, he's not a worse off-ball shooter. I'm like, huh? He's not a great ball handler. Blah, blah. I'm like, what? Like, isolation numbers are there. The DHO stuff is there. The secondary creation stuff is there. I'm like, I think there's another level.
Yeah, do the film, man. I mean, I wrote all this down over a dig. There's so much bounce to his game. I'm so excited to just watch a normal. This is not an insult for Mike. Mike was hyper specialized because that's the way that Denver needed him to play. And that's what I think that Mike gets to kind of work through now. And it'll be interesting at this age to see if he can do it, right? Like, Mike's a little bit older than most guys get this opportunity, but can he really grow into that? If he can, he's going to have a really amazing, probably last chapter to his career. But to me, it's like Cam's just like, like an all around normal NBA player. Yeah. And that's going to be like, I think, really fun to watch. So the last thing I kind of want to mention was just the person that Porter was, which, Mike and I didn't talk about these things. I wasn't going to I don't have personal conversations with the players because I don't think that they want to have a personal relationship with me. But like Mike and I would never agree on things like vaccination. Mike and I would never agree on a lot of like the things like the way that he was raised and his political beliefs. But I was always blown away by the respectfulness that he had for everyone that he interacted with, from staff to coaching to media, and the honesty that he provided, which sometimes was intentional and sometimes I think not. But like Mike was like very genuine with us. He was very genuine as a Nugget. Like, he genuinely said, I want to win. That's what I care about. And he backed it up. And he was always, he was never coming in with like, he wasn't defensive about criticism. Mike is one of the few players I've ever covered who I could actually like have a conversation about with like, you struggled here. And he's not, you say that to Jamal and Jamal's like, did I? Did I? What do you know about it? What do you think? Well, like, Mike was just like, yeah, it was a hard game. I think I got to do this or this better. I loved covering Michael Porter Jr. I absolutely loved covering Mike. And I did not expect that given a number of things. And for a guy with that kind of high school credibility that Swipa mentioned, for him to have brought that in and to have played with the humility that he did, I have an endless amount of respect for Mike because of that.
And I want to credit Mike for that. And I want to say directly that his father, Michael Porter, and his mother, they absolutely baked into him to maintain that level of humility. And Matt, I said this very, it's hard. I think it's really hard to be 6'10" and like the best athlete that's ever walked, in the city you're from, and to keep like this ultimate humility. But I think to the point, being able to have critical conversations about your game and the thing you need to develop and being willing to explore, I do think that you have to be born, I think, in a certain context and having, I think, a mentality instilled in you to approach everything with willing to dissect what's in front of you. And I really think, and having talked to his dad a few times, that was something they really laid into him. And I think especially my end pieces here, for you to be able to come over adversity in life is the biggest thing. Like, the things you will go through in this life will shape you. And you can let those things mold you into the worst version of yourself or to the best version of yourself. And I think Mike, he internalized what happened to him to try to be the very best athlete and professional basketball player he could. And that is my biggest compliment, I think, to him and his time in Denver.
Ryan, last word.
Yeah, he was always a genuine person. That, to me, I think came across in everything that he discussed while he was with us in Denver. We will never fully have the perspective of kind of who he was. That the media player relationship is never going to go that far. But I do think just from being around him and asking him questions and him being willing to deal with somebody like me, that he absolutely, like, he earned respect throughout all levels of media, just because of how he handled himself and how he comported himself through what was a really tough situation. So credit to him and the willingness that he had to do that. And also, I'm just wishing him the best, man. I really do wish that he breaks out in Brooklyn. Like, that would be a great story. And you want continued success for those guys. So good luck to him.
That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Appreciate you guys being with us. Catch Swipa on Twitter at SwipaCam and on Player's Choice. Ryan Blackburn's on Mile High Sports and the Pickaxe and Roll podcast. I'll have a piece up on Mike's time in Denver over the Denver Dig, as well as some other stuff about the offseason. Hey, Summer League. Hey. We'll talk about Summer League this week as it keeps going. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.